Hello, I'm Rosemary Ravenel, public speaking coach and media trainer. And welcome to the first Makeover Mondays LinkedIn broadcast. This space is designed to improve your life on the small screen. We may be returning to the physical realm soon, but virtual will remain an important part of the way we work. My guests for these series are successful communicators and creators who are redefining the virtual space. Remember to post your questions and comments on the chat, and we'll get to as many as time permits. I'm very excited that my first guest is Dave Bricker. Dave is an award-winning speaker, author, presentation coach, transatlantic sailor. He spent 15 years on a sailboat in search of stories. He's the author of 12 books, including an adventure sailing memoir, 2 books about writing, and 3 about storytelling. His company, Remarkable Stories, teaches the art of business transformation through storytelling. Dave's latest adventure is the online course, 52 Speaking Blunders, which looks at the lessons learned from the most common mistakes made by speakers and presenters. That doesn't include us, Dave, right?
Of course not.
So welcome. This is great to have you here.
Thank you, Rosemary. It's great to be here today. I've been looking forward to this.
Terrific. And we got great colors going here. This is very visual. Isn't it important to have the visual, right, when we're doing video conferencing? And
I think so.
Still so many people don't turn on their cameras. Well, there's a lot to talk about in very little time. Dave, you talk about transformation, about storytelling and public speaking being a form of transformation. Tell me more.
I think transformation lies at the end of every story. Without some place for the characters to get to, what's the story? It's a bunch of people doing something. Hey, I went to work today. Great, thanks. What's for dinner? Story over. And I think speakers forget about this too. Too many speakers, whether they're speaking in a pitch, whether they're speaking in front of a stadium, they get up and they bloviate about themselves. And it's me and what I did, and I did this. And the purpose of a presentation is to transform the audience. And if you don't know how you want them to think, feel, or act differently at the end of your presentation, then what are you up there wasting air for?
Right. But the transformation, how do you, this is obviously complicated, particularly when we're talking about virtual. How do you know that you have achieved some transformation while you're in the process of delivering your talk?
Well, obviously, when you can see people and when your attendees show up with their cameras on, then you have some cues. Usually what happens, though, is people are, if they're engaged, they're going to ask questions. They're going to want to learn more. They may even jump the gun and ask you questions about things you haven't had a chance to talk about yet. And that chat box gets pretty active.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you see no activity that you wonder. And then, of course, there's a transformation. At the end of your presentation, does someone ask a question, or does somebody say, can I visit your website? Where can I learn more? Can we schedule a second meeting? Who do I write the check to? Somebody's going to show you evidence of that transformation.
Mm-hmm. And is there a moment when you feel, I'm sure you have, that you're not landing any of your message points are not landing, you see blank faces, or you don't get anything in the chat. How do you sort of pivot from that point where you feel like you're there sort of without an oar, to use an analogy from sailing? I mean, you're just there, and how do you pivot?
Well, I think one of the things that people forget to do is to lead by listening. And if you feel that you are not getting any input from the audience and you're worried that they're all reading their email on their cell phones with their camera off, then maybe it's time to ask them some questions. Not something obvious like, hey, what am I doing wrong? Am I boring you? Because that's not professional. But can you stop talking and start listening and see if you can dial into some of the things that are troubling the people who are watching you. What problems can you solve for them? Because if you're talking about something that's relevant and meaningful to the audience, they will listen.
Mm-hmm. Right. And how does that, again, I need to bring it back to virtual. How do you know, except for the chat, how do you sort of pivot again that, again, there's so much that we can't see, and particularly when people aren't turning on their cameras, right? So do you have some examples of how you've been able to take a different route when you feel like your virtual message is just not landing?
I honestly haven't had too many times where I felt the virtual message wasn't landing, but I've watched a lot of presentations, and look, I don't mean to come off like, oh well, I've always been a great speaker, because I've had that experience where I've bombed. And our mutual friend Bruce Turkel warned me years in advance that that would happen one day, and it's a rite of passage, and it did, and I embraced it, and that's all right. But when you're not connecting with an audience, and look, we've all watched plenty of boring Zoom presentations. What can you do? What can the speaker do? Stop, ask questions, have a poll ready, have a graphic ready. You've got to engage the audience. And I think the audience is part of the presentation. If they're so disengaged that they won't even respond to questions, then I don't know if it's worth it for you to continue to spend your time up there talking about something they're not interested in. I'm, like I said, I haven't had that experience. But if you do your homework ahead of time, if you talk to some people from the organization you're speaking to, and you are aware up front that you're going to be addressing things that are relevant to them, it really shouldn't be an issue.
Mm-hmm. Well, that takes really a lot of planning, because most of what succeeds requires tremendous amount of preparation, and many people don't understand that excellence is achieved by practicing, by preparing, right, and also by having a contingency plan, right, a plan B, particularly when you're talking about technology, right?
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of technology, about a year ago, before March of 2020, you were in the process of creating this book, Speak Inside the Box, which I think is so prescient because it came out right around the time we realized we were going into lockdown. And you talk about everything that a speaker needs to know about doing virtual presentations. And you were talking about not only organizing content, how to organize your message, but then how to use the technology. And I'm wondering, I mean, what was in your crystal ball back then? And how do you, what do you see in that crystal ball today?
Maybe I'm just a realist. I don't know. To me, I didn't have a crystal ball. I looked at what was happening, and I remember going to a meeting back in February where it was a bunch of meeting. It was MPI. It was a Meeting Professionals International meeting, and people were talking about, gee, what's going to happen to our industry? Our calendars are getting wiped out. People are canceling events. What's going to happen? And I thought to myself, what's going to happen is something that you don't want to admit to yourself right now, but what's going to happen is obvious. We have an out of control pandemic. This thing is multiplying exponentially. And I didn't see anybody doing all that much about it. I saw a lot of fumbling happen. They tested the people and then let them off the cruise ship before they had the results. And I went home and I said, we're all going to end up on some sort of lockdown, and we are going to be switching to virtual. I don't think this isn't rocket surgery. This is like, hey, this is happening. I'm not happy it's happening. All of the speakers I know just had their calendars wiped out, but here it is. And I thought, okay, things are going to slow down real fast. I'm going to hit the brakes. I'm going to start writing this book and try to be first out of the gate, because while everybody's sitting around processing what they think might happen, I just sat down and wrote a book about to help people out, because it seemed pretty obvious what would happen.
Right. And it really was what's ahead of its time. I think your book was probably the first out the gate. And this was the time when people were still trying to figure out, do I need to put on my camera? Do I need to invest in anything? And there was a great deal of improvisation, right, that was going on as we were trying to figure out how long would this last? How do we survive? Do I really have to get out of my pajamas to take this team meeting? And still people aren't quite getting it, right? Still people aren't recognizing that how you appear, how you show up in this space is critical to your career, to your business, to your reputation. And so I think we're going to have to continue to, to underscore that message going forward, because we're going to be doing a lot of this, even when some of us go back to work in a physical space, some, or either all the time or some of the time, right? Is that the way you see things going forward?
Rosemary, absolutely. I think there are too many people who are sitting around waiting for the future to turn back into the past, and it's not going to happen. What is going to happen is I think we're going to move toward hybrid meetings, and I think we're going to have a lot of people who, for example, they're going to say, gee, my office building's been shuttered for a year, and I think what I'm going to do is get out of that huge lease and put that money in my pocket. And then other people are going to get called back to work, and they're going to say, boss, if it's all the same to you, I've been home for a year and I'm going to skip those 2 hours a day on I-95 that I never got paid for and almost got killed for X number of times. And I think we're going to have this switch. A lot of companies will probably say, gee, I want the third floor of the office building every other Friday. And then the rest of the time, people will be at home. Virtual presentation, virtual meeting is here to stay. And I think what you do on camera is the equivalent of that nice sport jacket and tie or those heels you had. What did you wear to meetings? What was your office fashion? This is the new office fashion. And the people who learn to dress for success are going to be the ones who excel.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. Now, we're at the point in our 30 minutes where I want to ask you sort of a lightning round of questions. And we can go back to any of the things we talked about. And certainly I see some questions popping into the chat. So let me ask you, Dave Bricker, the first question is, what can't you live without? What can't you live without?
Well, let me get a little woo-woo on you there. I'm going to say I can't live without meaning and purpose. And that's a little more practical than it sounds. As a storyteller, as a presenter, to me, again, it's all about understanding what the transformation is, but it's also, I want to know that if I am presenting, that I am serving my audience, that I am leaving them with something that they didn't have before my presentation. Also, if I'm trying to learn something, I'm not one of those people where you can say, here, learn this. Why do I need to learn this? How am I going to use this? What tools is this new knowledge going to give me? Because if you just say, here's calculus in a book, go learn it. Not going to happen. But if you give me a book of calculus and say, and I know that I need that tool to accomplish something, then I'm driven. I'll sit down and teach myself calculus from a book. It's just a matter of having that meaning and purpose, understanding the functional aspects of what I want to accomplish, and then what does that do for people?
Right. It's almost like you're talking about intention, right? What is your intention? What is the intended transformation that you want to achieve, right? So yes, no, I love the woo-woo. Woo-woo is great in this case. And you can give me more of it. But
so how many classes did you take where it's like, okay, you need to take subject X? And it's like, why do I have to take subject X? I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to use this.
Yeah.
And I find it very difficult to stay motivated. And the best teachers are the ones who begin with, why do you want to learn this? Right. And they make it relevant to you, just as any other speaker. And teachers are speakers too. Most of them just don't know it.
It's very good. That's an excellent point. Now, second question. What ritual do you have before you take the stage, be it physical or virtual stage?
So I'm going to go unwoo-woo on you here. My ritual is really simple. I do my homework on the audience I'm going to be presenting to. So for example, I just gave a presentation to a sales team at a company. And what did I do? I got on the phone with two of their salespeople. Yeah, I talked to the managers. These are the people on the top of the pyramid. I got on the phone with two of the reps and said, what are you struggling with? What might I be able to help you with? And I got a whole lot of stuff. And that presentation was very successful because I made it relevant to them. So I do my homework with the people I'm going to be serving. And then I do my homework with my presentation. Yeah, of course, I have my slide deck that's pretty standard for my keynote or my workshops and things like that. But I tweak it for that audience. I do something to make it relevant. I make sure their logo is on the front slide. And I might delete some questions that are maybe a little far afield for them and add some elements that are, it's all about being prepared. My ritual preparing for a presentation is to prepare to serve the audience.
Nice, nice. My ritual, by the way, is to meditate for about 5 minutes, to just clear my mind and not think about what I may forget or the outcome. Just be in the moment. But we can talk about that another time. But
And I do a mini version of that. And I coach speakers. I always encourage people, start with the power pause. Okay, you're ready to speak. Let the applause, the opening applause finish, and then take that power pause and get yourself in the right set.
Yeah, yeah. Now, this is a question that goes right into your latest adventure. What's the biggest blunder you ever made?
Well, there was this girl. You mean
As a speaker, as a speaker.
As a speaker, biggest blunder I ever made. And I've made a lot of them. I think the biggest blunder I've ever made is just overcommitting, trying to do too many presentations back to back, or and then the presentation parts to get, that part starts to get diluted. And so there's only so much of this you can do, even if you're sitting at home and it's like, okay, meeting. That's different from presentation. But I'll share one with you that caught me by surprise, which was, I was speaking and there were two speakers right after me, and I was using slides. It was a pretty informal setting. So I finished my presentation and I closed my laptop and I picked up the little table that the laptop was on, and I cleared the stage for the next person, which, hey, what a kind professional thing to do. But you know what? When I got the feedback afterward from a friend of mine who was in the room, and she was a real neophyte speaker, and this struck me. She said, when you finished your presentation, I loved your presentation, and your ending was killer. It was just great. And there was this energy in the room. And then you went from being a rock star to a roadie. You all of a sudden you started packing up your stuff, and it just destroyed the energy. And I realized, right, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? What I should have done is thank my audience, left the stage, because the impact isn't in the words you say, it's in the echo of the words that you say. And if somebody had to come up behind me and move that table and take the 15 seconds to do that, I mean, it's not like I made them clean my room or something. It's not that much to ask. And there's an MC there. There are people there working the stage. So leave the audience with your parting shot and let somebody come and just arrange that ahead of time with stage, because I didn't realize how much damage I'd done to the impact.
You have to continue the magic, right? That you have to just stretch it and don't burst the bubble.
Right.
So, yeah. Now, that was your blunder. Now you've just created 52 distinct lessons that speak to blunders that speakers and presenters make. So you might say, are there really 52? Did you double up at times? I mean, and what among the 52? And I know that this is like people receive one video and one mini course at a time. But how did you come up with these? And certainly they're not all yours. But among those, what are like the top few, like the real zingers that probably people listening today can identify with?
Okay. So the 52 just came from the fact that there are 52 weeks in a year. And I like this idea of a course where you get a 3 to 5 minute video once a week, because you're actually going to consume that material. Most people who buy an online course, more than half of them never even open the course. We've all got business books, read 2 chapters, stuck them on the nightstand, and then stuck the next book on top of it. And there we go. So I wanted a different format. And and that's been a fun thing. So that's where the 52 came from. I actually had to narrow them down. I've been a Toastmaster for a long time. And over my years in Toastmasters, I calculate that I have watched, I don't know, 600 or 700 short speeches. And I've watched a lot of people do brilliant things, and I've watched a lot of people make mistakes. And that's where a lot of that comes from. And of course, in National Speakers Association, hanging out with professional speakers, they tell you some of the very high level mistakes that they've made where the stakes are a little higher. But it all is stuff that impacts the effect on the audience that you have. So some common mistakes. One is not to use your full range. And I think when people are presenting, either they're scared and they tend to present like this and their voice is up in their head.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Dave is frozen for a moment, but we will probably see him return just a moment. So what Dave was saying is that use the full range of your vocal variety and of your nonverbal communication, if I'm interpreting it correctly. Dave, please come back. Ugo, can we go to the next answer, the next tip, I should say, and maybe Dave will be back in time. Okay. So Dave advanced these to me, and he answered the second tip is be a journeyist, not a journalist. The idea being to take your audience, your participants on a journey, similar to the way he talks about sailing and taking trips and the stories that evolve from that experience. So take them on a story trip. Take them, transform them through storytelling. Take them on a trip that they would not have considered taking before, but they will leave them with something that is unique and purposeful. So that's his tip number 2. And his tip number 3 is turn nervous into service, which is actually one of the best pieces of advice that even experienced presenters and speakers can take, which is everyone gets nervous. Everyone gets butterflies in the stomach. Everyone is going to say, this is probably my 1,000th speech, but I still tremble a little bit. My hands shake. It's natural. Everybody has that. It's almost like it's innate in our bodies to react to that little bit of fear that they may not like us, right? What Dave is saying is to turn those butterflies in your stomach, right, into the energy that drives your success. So turn that energy into something powerful. Turn that energy into vocal variety. Turn it into energetic movements on the stage if you're in a physical space. Turn that into animating the rectangle of virtual meetings that we populate these days. So take the nerves and put them into action and have them serve you as opposed to limit your ability to succeed. So those are the 3 tips that Dave shared with us. We have some questions that I was hoping that Dave would be able to answer, but maybe I can tackle them a little bit. We have one from Caroline who asked, is it true that some people don't engage but still get value from a presentation? Caroline, I don't know, and I think Dave would agree. I don't think that people will get as much value from it if they don't engage. Why is that? Because this environment, the virtual meeting space, is very intimate. Whether we realize it or not, we're looking at each other more closely than we would in physical spaces, right? And that sense of intimacy is sometimes off-putting to people, right? It's intimidating. So where the connection, the human connection happens is when we engage. And we don't have to necessarily think that someone's going to turn on their mics and cameras and do a long presentation or ask a long question, or it's just having that presence, that attention from participants that says, I'm listening. And in turn, they're being seen. And there's something about that seeing someone, that sense of acknowledgement of the other person that improves the way these types of meetings unfold. So yeah, it depends on the meeting. If you're just receiving information, you may not necessarily have to engage. But generally, if you want to grow in your career, have more clout and more authority in what you do, engagement is very much the way to go. Any other questions? And we just experienced technical difficulties that, and I know this is probably Dave's way of ensuring that I'm going to invite him back. And here he is. Dave, we were
hearing from Verizon.
we were talking about you. We were saying that, hey, you know what, Dave, I'm not going to have him back on this broadcast. No, on the contrary, I was filling in your answers because you had given me, fortunately, the 3 tips in advance, and I hope I did them justice. But we have a few minutes, and unless there's another great question like Caroline's, I'm going to give you the floor to expand on the 3 points, the 3 tips that, wait, there's a great question here. I've got to give Bruce the floor. How do we use all aspects of our presentation, content, presentation skills, environment to help our audiences both learn more and remember us favorably? Dave, it's all yours.
Thanks for the question, Bruce. Of course, it's a broad question. I see a presentation, think of it as architecture. So if you go and you look at a lot of buildings, they're big rectangles, and we tend to think, okay, that's a big, ugly rectangle. It doesn't do anything for us. So the architects come in and maybe they put some shutters on the house. They put some awnings on the house. There's carport that juts out. Maybe there's a circular driveway. We start adding all of these elements. So think of that box as the content. And then what can we do in terms of how do we add some relief to that? And one thing is the vocal dynamics. We don't talk like a radio operator the whole time. We make our big points, and then we ask people to think about them. We might speak quickly when we're getting excited, and then slow down, ask people to reflect. And of course, then there's the general presentation. Are we just a talking head? Now, this is a conversation, but in a presentation that would be different. Maybe we want to stand up so that we can get back. There's room to use our hands, and maybe we want to say something and then get close to the screen and say, well, actually, I'm exaggerating a little bit. Use the camera proximity. There are so many of these performance variables ranging from your vocal dynamics, your range from low to high, from mild to wild, from fast to slow, using the pauses. All of these things to me are the shutters, the carport, the driveway, the things that we add to that box to make it interesting. And I hope I answered your question, Bruce. Thank you for that one.
Great. One more question from Elaine before we need to say goodbye. Is it good to have an assistant to field chat questions when working or engaging in a virtual space? And how do you, Dave, do this?
I think that is a great question, Elaine. And it's interesting that you bring it up because I have actually done this with Rosemary, where we have been the meeting monster, which is our slang for meeting monitor for one another, because especially if you're standing up and giving a dynamic presentation, it really helps if I can say, Rosemary, can you tell me what's going on in the chat? Because even if I can see the chat from my camera across the room, it's not like I want to walk back and forth and type in it, things like that. Also, having somebody spotlight the speaker, and maybe I'm spotlighted and then I'm coaching somebody and the meeting monster spotlights that person, and now we've got the 2 boxes and we can really control that experience for the audience. So that's the long answer. Yes, it really helps to have somebody assist you with a virtual meeting.
Terrific. Dave, you will be back another Monday. For now, tell us how we can get in touch with you.
You can get in touch with me. My main site is storysailing.com. And if you're interested in the 52 Speaking Blunders, that's 52speakingblunders.com. And reach out. I am happy to answer any and all questions, provided they're not too tough.
Wonderful. Dave, it's been a delight to have you, and we will see you here in this space again. As far as my closing, I urge you all to improve the way you appear, the way you interact on Zoom. Check your Zoom IQ by going to getyourzoomscore.com and see how well you rate against 10 different variables that comprise professional video presence. This has been a pleasure. Again, thank you to all who participated. We'll see you again in this same space, same time, same station next Monday. Thank you all for watching.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Goodbye.